Thank you, Madeline, for getting us off to such a pleasant start. Maura, thank you for your accompaniment. I'll introduce Madeline in a moment, but we've still got folks greeting each other, getting their coffee, tinkling their cups, giggling. All right. Not that we can't have a little noise, but, we want to give everyone a proper hello this morning. So I want to start, as usual, by welcoming you all to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short here, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to each and every one of you. We begin, as usual, by embracing all that you bring with you, all of your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences. All that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning, and that includes those of you who are in the room with us. Whether you are a regular attendee or perhaps joining us for the first time, you're equally as welcome and appreciated. And of course, it includes the many of you that are streaming with us this morning too. So welcome to one and all. It's great to have you. I do want to begin. If you did not see this morning's or this week's Sun, our church newsletter, what does the Sun stand for? Why am I forgetting? I always just call it the Sun. What is the acronym?
Unitarian Universalist Newsletter.
What's the S for?
Spokane.
Spokane. Oh, yeah, because I should have known. Well, it's UUCS, not SUUC, right? So I'm wrestling with acronyms. By the way, for those who are guests, you might as well just leave now because it doesn't get any better. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. Okay. For those who have not seen the Spokane UU newsletter, The Sun, our longtime, I should say, music director, Deb Jackman, has retired, or is retiring. Her official retirement date will be August 31st, but as is her tradition, she's already begun her summer sabbatical, so we won't be seeing Deb for most of the summer, but we do hope that when she comes back, we can have a nice retirement party as a way of saying thanks for her years of service. I think almost 34 years, the longest employee the church has had in its history. So be sure and thank Deb and congratulate her if you should happen to catch a glimpse of her in the next few weeks. In the meantime, I want to welcome a wonderful individual who is, at the very least, our summer song leader. Agreed to help us out with that much and kind of getting to know the church, but she got us started off to a great start today, and that is Madeline McNeil. There's a lot more to Madeline than I could say in just a few words, and I hope that you'll have an opportunity to get to know her as I will over the weeks and months and hopefully even years. So Madeline really began her career, or I should say her career search, her endeavors around career, working on a pre-med degree. But eventually she reconsidered that and initially turned to alternative medicine and spirituality, but ended up at the music department of Western Washington University. That's quite a turnaround. And today she performs solo and group shows throughout the Northwest as a singer and an artist philosopher, and also writes original plays and rituals. And I would encourage you to actually look up some of her work on YouTube, and you will be blown away. She's got a very gifted voice. Are you trained in operatic singing? Is that so? Your training is opera, yeah. Just powerful voice, and I think we are just so fortunate to have such a talented and accomplished music artist with us for at least the next couple of months. And thank you so much for your willingness to step in at the last minute like this. And we'll try to get your name in the what is the little bulletin that we call that? We have a name for that too, don't we? Anyway, we'll definitely work on introducing you properly to the congregation. But thanks so much for being here. Okay, I think we'll take a couple extra minutes here this morning to greet one another, so feel free to say hi to those that you know and look forward to seeing each Sunday and make some new friends today. And if you are joining us today, please don't be too shy. We're very glad to have you joining us for the first time. All right, and thank you for that. And as always, there's more opportunity to visit with one another during our social hour following the service. For those who might be joining us for the first time, we have coffee and tea and whatnot back there as well. So stick around and help yourselves. We'd be glad to have you. We are going to move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. Our scheduled lay leader this morning. Candace Schmidt was not feeling well, and so stayed home, but she was kind enough to send the readings that she had selected for this morning's service. So I'll share those with you. For those who have not served as lay leaders before, you may not know that as a lay leader, I ask that you select your own readings. My feeling is that if people are going to be up here, we're asking them to be up here, right? And that what you read should be an expression of your own insight, your own interest, your own thoughts, your own search, things that are meaningful to you. So these are not my words. These are words that were selected for us by Candace Schmidt. So be sure and thank her next time you see her. And these opening words today are from Ovid's Metamorphoses. As wave is driven by wave, and each pursues the wave ahead, so time flies on and follows, flies and follows, always, forever, and new. What was before is left behind. What never was is now, and every passing moment is renewed.
Please join me in singing Spirit of Life 2 times through. Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Thank you.
We will now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning, and we'll begin, as we have been, on behalf of the people of Ukraine and that part of the world that are being most devastated, impacted by the unnecessary violence and war going on in that region of the world. I did not receive any particular requests from our congregation for candles this week, but Tom Moser was letting me know, actually reminding me of the United Church of Christ Church here in our own community, Veridale United Church of Christ, that has had some attacks against it for some of its pro-LGBTQ work. And we saw something like this after the election of Donald Trump, where white supremacists, white nationalists kind of came out of the woodwork for a while and started going after lots of folks, including churches in our community. And we see this now after the Supreme Court decisions this week happening again. So we will be thinking of our neighbors and friends at the Veradale United Church of Christ. That's I understand they're actually having a service this afternoon to help continue to show their unflinching support of our brothers and sisters in the LGBTQ community. Not sure what time that is, but it is this afternoon. They're on 611 North Progress Road. Tom Mosier is back there. He's waving his hand, and he's going to go. And if anyone needs a ride, he will be happy to take you as well. So thank you, Tom. Yeah, so there's a lot of people I know in our country right now that are kind of recoiling, troubled by some of the High Court's decisions this week. So lots of candles we could be lighting for a lot of people. So we will let these stand for all of the concerns that we share in our church as well as throughout the world today. And we're going to go into a brief moment of silence on their behalves. And as always, you're welcome to name aloud those you might be thinking of at this time. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world. Thank you so much, Todd Milne, for that. Todd, of course, is most usually in our AV booth running our sound and visuals for us. Shelley, thank you for filling in today, as always. Great to have you. But this is really, what Todd does. Todd's a musician, and that's how he was introduced to this congregation. And when this position came open, he was happy to step in for us. We're very glad that he did, but fundamentally he's a musician, and we don't get to hear him often enough, I don't think. So we need to keep you up here as often as we can, Todd. And turns out that Todd and I both, our first day was the same day. Todd played music for us the first time I spoke at the UU Church of Spokane. So it was two Todds for one day. Two Todds for one special that the church took advantage of. And D&T. We're still here. Yeah, you still look the same. I know I've gotten older, but anyway, thank you, Todd. And we're looking forward to hear more of your talent in just a few moments. But it's time now for our story for all ages. And if any of the kids in the room want to come forward, I have a special guest. You can come up here and you can sit on the soft, cushy floor. There. That's good. A lot of the kids are out somewhere today. I think have gone on vacation already. They couldn't wait for school to end, and off they're gone. But you guys the important ones are still here. Okay, I'm gonna show you a little furry friend of mine. I want you to tell me if you know what this is by looking at it. Can you tell what this is? It's not a hedgehog. It might be related to a hedgehog. Pretty close.
I know what they are, but I forgot what they're called.
Come here, I'll whisper it to you. Come here. Is it a possum? Yeah. Possum. Go say that. What did you think it was? What?
It's a possum.
A possum. Perfect. Very good. Now, possums are actually, I want to talk about possums because they're one of my favorite animals, okay? And they actually are strong enough to hang off of tree branches with these very long, thick tails, right? And their actual official name is opossum. Yeah. But they were bountiful in the South, at least, and we called them possums. So one of the amazing things about these possums is they have been around for at least 20 million years. Maybe longer. Maybe as much as 25, even 30 million years. And they haven't changed. Isn't that amazing to think of an animal that is so perfect that it has withstood the changes around it for millions of years and has not needed to evolve? It's perfect, just the way you are. Yes. Now, these are also the only marsupial in North America. Do you know what a marsupial is? Do you know what a kangaroo is? What makes a kangaroo special? Different. You know? They can jump really high, yeah, but possums don't jump. What's that? It has a pouch. That's it. A marsupial is an animal that has a pouch for carrying their young, their babies. And possums carry their babies in a pouch like a kangaroo. It's the only type of animal in North America that has that ability. So they're very unusual. So unusual that some people might have thought they were mythical creatures when first hearing them described. When the English explorer, to be polite, John Smith, saw an opossum for the first time nearly 400 years ago, he'd never seen anything like it, and he described it to others by saying it has the head of a pig, the tail of a rat, and is as big as a cat. Kind of like a platypus, right? Lots of different animals in there. And the word opossum is a Native American word that means something like white dog. White dog, that's what they thought of it. And opossums they make a hissing noise if you've ever been around one, and they have razor sharp teeth all the way from the top of their mouths, from the front of their mouths to the back of their mouths, top and bottom, and they would go very scary. But the truth is, possums are pretty harmless. They're very shy, which is why this one's keeping its head tucked in the crook of my arm. And some of them that have had to be rescued have actually made very loving pets. So they're not really scary animals. They're nocturnal, which means they come out at night, mostly. So you rarely see them during the day. What's one of the things you've heard about possums that makes them unique? Does anybody know one of the things they're most known for?
Play dead.
Play dead, yes. Possums are called playing dead. That's something we say. We sometimes say play possum, right? It means playing dead. But possums don't actually play dead. One of the unique things about them is that when they are threatened and afraid, they faint. There's a chemical reaction in their brains that causes them to faint, and it also causes their bodies to stiffen and to release an odor that makes them smell like they've been decaying for weeks. So when an animal comes up to them and wants to eat them and it gets one whiff and says, "Oh my goodness, this can't be healthy, it's been decaying for weeks," and they walk away, and before long the possum kind of comes to and looks around, and the predator's gone and the possum is safe. So that's a pretty good strategy for surviving predators, right? If you're a helpless little possum. Okay, so I want to tell you a funny story about a possum that I met one time. Because when I lived in Louisville, we saw them a lot. And for some reason during the day, this possum had wandered into my backyard, and it was climbing over about a 4-foot high chain link fence to get to the other side. They also have some chicken in them, apparently. Oh, bad. And once it got up to the top of that fence, it saw me standing there. And the poor possum was up on the pole, sort of waddling back and forth like this, and it couldn't turn around fast enough to go back down the other side because I was standing there, and if I was a hungry predator, I might have leaped on it. And at the same time, it couldn't come forward because it would have been so slow climbing down the fence that I also would have been able to capture it. So the possum was afraid, and it was stuck, and it didn't know what to do. You know what it did? The last possible thing it could do. No, it didn't play dead because it would have fallen off the fence. So it just turned and looked away from me. Like if it couldn't see me, I couldn't see it. Now that's not such a good strategy for dealing with our problems, is it? Pretending they're not there. So we're going to give the possum an A- today for being a wonderful animal, just because it wasn't so good about figuring that one out. And we could still learn something from the possum, and that is we should probably not turn away from our challenges to try to escape them, right? Or pretend that they're not there. We should take them on. Yeah, you play dead. No. Okay. So we're going to. Do you guys want to pet the possum, by the way? Yeah, sometimes they do. And then we'll sing the children out.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of God surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
And I ask you to join with me in a responsive reading this morning from the back of the gray hymnal, number 660. And I will ask our congregation, along with Madeline, to be our respondents today, and I will begin. Why should we live in such a hurry and waste of life?
We are determined to be starved before we are hungry.
I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life.
I wish to learn what life has to teach, and not, when I come to die, discover that I have not lived.
I do not wish to live what is not life. Living is so dear.
Nor do I wish to practice resignation unless it is quite necessary.
I wish to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life.
I want to cut a broad swath, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms.
If it proves to be mean, then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world.
Or if it is sublime, to know it by experience and to be able to give a true account of it.
Thanks again, Todd. Reminds me of the early days of the COVID lockdown. It was just Todd and I in here, all by ourselves. And Todd was back there, and I was up here, and Todd was generous enough to play his recorded music for us throughout our service. That's all we had. It was more than enough. Thank you. It's good to hear you again. So today is the first Sunday of July, marking the start of what for us is another church year. And I want to begin, as I usually do, with my annual Preaching to the Preacher sermon. My sermons are never the dispensation of what I consider my own knowledge. They are rather an expression of my current exploration of the disciplines and the issues that I'm interested in and concerned about at the time. Hence, my sermons are but a reflection of my own continuing search for truth and meaning. Occasionally, someone lets me know they think that I should be expressing the subjects that they are most interested in and concerned about, but that would not be healthy for any of us. All preachers should be aware that they often serve as mirrors for others, but we should shun any attempts to make our pulpits an acceptable place for projections. The pulpit, especially a free pulpit, has only one official occupant. It is the borrowed property of its installed minister, who bears the singular duty to protect and keep it as a place of honesty, no matter how welcome or unwelcome the words that come from it. The best way I know to do this, to accomplish this, is to speak authentically as an individual, which means speaking from my own experience, learning, and interest. The benefit to everyone is that I am doing real and fresh research, right? I often have ministers from other traditions say, well, if you don't speak from the Bible, what do you talk about? There's so much more. Turns out there's so much more. But you have to stay on top of it, right? It's more work, which is good, because the results of which I get to process through my own critical thinking skills, logic, and personal reflections before sharing them with you. As I stated in my sermon last September entitled, "My Pulpit Mine," this is not a drive-through pulpit in which I ask, may I take your order, please? My sermons come from my heart and my mind and are thus an expression of myself. The personal benefit of this is that a major part of my job is continuing my own search for truth and meaning. Imagine getting paid to do that. It means I get to work on growing and evolving and discovering and finally sharing a bit of my journey with you, which I hope most of you can relate to, as our different journeys often face some of the same immediate challenges and certainly all of life's perennial questions. So in this sense, I really am preaching to myself. Sermon preparation is for me but an opportunity to organize and reflect upon the information and insights that I gain. In years past, my sermon topics have varied as I have quite a lot of interest, and I still do, but these days I find myself gravitating toward fewer topics, mostly because of the turmoil that our liberal religion is currently experiencing and my potential role in helping to prevent it from becoming extinct, possibly even to thrive for the first time in decades, which is my goal. So I spent much of the past year studying the deep roots of our liberal religion in order to better understand and articulate its rich history and its essential values. And I'm still engaging in this course of study and have a stack of books I hope to read over the next months. I wrote the next few months, but I think it's going to be a lot longer than that. These include titles like The Pre-Socratic Philosophers by G.S. Kirk and J.E. Raven, The World of the Early Greek Philosophers by J.B. Wilbur and H.J. Allen, right? Because we want to start with the pre-Socratic philosophers who were the inspiration for the Renaissance that became the source of the values that flourished during the Enlightenment when our liberal religion was born, when liberalism was born. So to understand the history, we have to go back a long time. Another one is William Manchester's A World Lit Only by Fire, The Medieval Mind and the Renaissance, and Gloria Fierro's The Humanistic Tradition, The European Renaissance, the Reformation, and Global Encounter, An Introduction to Democratic Theory by Henry Mayo, The Philosophy of the Enlightenment by Ernst Cassirer, and The Seduction of Unreason, The Intellectual Romance with Fascism from Nietzsche to Postmodernism by Richard Wolin, and A History of Unitarianism in Transylvania, England, and America by Earl Morse Wilbur, to name just a few. So I guess that tells you what you will be likely hearing a lot about in the coming weeks and months. These titles don't include all that I've already delved into, obviously in preparation for Unitarian ministry, but also in just the past few years that have informed many of the sermons that I have given during this past year since last July. Even sermons as playful as Puppets and Persons and The Ethics of Uncontrolled Stops were ultimately about lifting up the principle of individual freedom that is at the heart of Unitarianism. The first of these, you may recall, involved a series of vignettes in which various puppet characters helped to illustrate my points. Since it was an intergenerational service, Charlie McCarthy, my old friend Charlie McCarthy, I don't know how many of you remember Charlie McCarthy, but he was quite the inspiration to me as a child, showed up to translate my explanation of philosopher Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative into language that even kids could understand. So it went something like this. Here's a stand-in for Charlie. So Immanuel Kant came to believe that it is never right to treat others as a means to our ends, but as an end within themselves. After conferring with me in a few whispers, Charlie said, "Why didn't you just say so in the first place? The old man didn't think it was nice to boss other people around." Very well said, Charlie. He believed that people should have the right to govern themselves and pursue their own interest. He thought that people should be free. Well, that simplifies it. Thank you. Nothing is required for this enlightenment, however, except freedom, and the freedom in question, at least, is the least harmful of all, namely, the freedom to use reason publicly in all matters. You got that? I got this. All right. The old man said, everyone should be free to think and speak for themselves. Very good. And that the public use of one's reason must always be free, and it alone can bring about enlightenment among mankind. And it really sucks when people can't. Very good, Charlie. Thank you. That's how you teach kids philosophy. So a quick word search indicates that I've referred to Kant's categorical imperative half a dozen times in the past year, including today's sermon. The imperative states that one should never be treated as a means to someone else's ends, but should be considered an end within themselves. You've probably all heard about Kant's categorical imperative, and most people think the categorical imperative just means something, some ethic that you would apply in all situations, in all circumstances. But the categorical imperative was very specific. That which should be applied in all circumstances is this idea that nobody should ever be treated as somebody else's ends, but should be considered an end within themselves. That's the categorical imperative. And this is one articulation of the Enlightenment's humanistic ethic, the notion that human welfare, including individual welfare and freedom, because we cannot be well if we are not free, must be our top moral priority. During the French Revolution, it was restated to something easier to say and something we're more familiar with today. In fact, it's in the U.S. Constitution. It was again, initially stated during the French Revolution, and that is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. And as you have probably often heard me refer to over the years, it is expressed by my favorite modern thinker, Erich Fromm, as the sole criterion of ethical value being human welfare, and that the unfolding and growth of every person should be the aim of all our social and political activities. So that's three ways of stating this humanistic ethic. However we put it, this is the principle that is most central to liberalism, and its values. It's why liberals get such a bad name, right? Because we're an affront to those who would use people for their own means. They don't want to be reminded. They're like that possum looking away from others so it doesn't have to see them. And the way this human dignity is maintained is through systems, governments, and cultures that promote freedom, reason, and tolerance above all. And I'll break away a little bit here to flesh out what I mean by those technologies, those social technologies. Freedom certainly is the freedom to speak and think for oneself. It's very liberal of us to want that. But it is also the freedom to participate in the benefits of society without prejudice, without interference from your neighbors or from the state. Reason is, of course, the belief that we should have some empirical evidence, rely upon science and logic to come to our conclusions about what is true and what isn't, even though those are never perfect. But more importantly, reason was a denunciation of doctrine. Reason was a denunciation of state dictates and dictums, right? It was that you can reason. It was the acknowledgement that you have the power to reason. I don't have to tell you what to think. We don't need authoritarian bullies telling us what to believe. That's up to us. That's why reason is so important, not just as a methodology, but as a trust in ourselves and a trust in others. And tolerance just being the very lowest goal in a society, the lowest goal a society needs in order to thrive. And that is, we must at least be tolerant of each other. Where we do disagree, where our reasoning doesn't line up with each other, we tolerate each other. That means we don't have to like each other, we don't have to love each other, right? We don't have to agree with each other, but we have to respect the inherent worth and dignity of each other. And that means we have to tolerate each other. And that is enough to keep a peaceful society. That's all it takes. It's better once we live with one another, with people who are different from us, to realize the differences aren't that important, or where they are important, they're really fantastic and we should celebrate them and learn from them and maybe be influenced by them. So there's a lot, when I say freedom, reason, and tolerance, repeatedly over and over, which I've said a lot over the past year, there's a lot to those. I mean, if you understand what we're getting at, you understand why society needs them to progress, and why societies have only progressed when those principles have been put into practice. But that's another sermon. So, believing in the importance of these values also requires us to have a positive view of humanity. And I said positive, not Pollyannish. Some people can be real jerks some of the times. Have you met them? You know who I'm talking about then, right? But most of us also want to naturally do the right thing and care, and we care for others. As Socrates said, I think, nobody knowingly does wrong. We want to do good and we want to do right by others. That's our instinct. That's a belief that liberals have about human beings. We believe in human goodness, human potential, human agency. That's another thing we've been traditionally taught to ignore. And this was really the main point of that other sermon I mentioned, the ethics of uncontrolled stops, which was ultimately about how this positive view of human nature and agency has long been fundamental to Unitarianism, right? Ethics of uncontrolled stops is we don't need stop signs. We can figure out how to get through intersections without loss, right? Taking proper turns. Okay, so here's what I said in that sermon. This is uniquely so of American Unitarianism in particular. It was born in the argument against the New Birth movement during the so-called Great Awakening of the 18th century, based upon the idea that all humans are born in a natural state of depravity because of original sin and must therefore be born again. But this idea was challenged by the Congregationalist, soon-to-be Unitarian minister Charles Chauncey, who argued instead that human beings are born with the capacity for both sin and righteousness, for both evil and good. Even if we're not always good, there is goodness within us, which was a radically heretical idea for the time after centuries of the doctrine of original sin. Tempted as I am because of how passionate I currently am about this, I need not go much further into it now. But put simply, our liberal religion is rooted in this positive view of human nature and human potential, leading us to the humanistic ethic. Right? When you believe in the goodness of human beings, we have to treat them ethically, with worth and dignity. That all persons and all people have inherent worth and dignity and should be treated as such, which can only be accomplished through these technologies, these social technologies of freedom, reason, and tolerance. That's how we respect the worth and dignity of every person and all peoples. Now, this is the wisdom and ethic that first emerged, again, during the age of antiquity, was rediscovered during the Renaissance, and then flourished during the Enlightenment, and now needs to be revived again today with the help of our liberal religion. That's why we're here. We're not here to survive and to keep our local church going and not think about the problems of the world. What's the name of the church again, Gordon? The Spokane, what is it? You can't remember. The UU Church of Spokane. It's important and we're responsible for it because of the impact we have in our lives and our larger community. But we also have a mission to the larger world. That mission dropped on us, right? It's fallen on us in recent years. So we have to fulfill it. And to accomplish this, us liberals not only have to understand and articulate these values to others, but must most importantly demonstrate them in our own lives and interactions. In other words, we of all people should treat one another respectfully, especially those with whom we disagree. Toward this end, I have also often addressed some of the tools and techniques we have for doing so. Most recently, I addressed this in my sermon, Unfolding Ourselves, How to Become Fully Human, in which I talked about our ethical duty to continue improving throughout our lives by developing moral character, emotional intelligence, intellectual integrity, and a philosophy of life. I particularly appreciate a sentence from that sermon stating that emotional thinkers are desperate to convince everyone else they are right. Intellectual integrity wants us most of all to be honest with ourselves. That's a pretty succinct rule of thumb, that when we are desperately trying to convince others that we are right, we're not being rational nor honest with ourselves. The more strongly we moralize our opinions, the more we're being guided by our emotions. the more we are rationalizing what we want. In my sermon, reality is the only thing that's real, or is it? I used emerging virtual reality technology as a catalyst for questioning our paradigms about what we believe is real and true. We can't fully unfold if we don't get out of our own way, if we don't break through the husk of the seed that contains all the information that wants to fully unfold into everything that it can be. And we can't do this if we're not willing to question the beliefs that make us feel secure, that make us feel sure, that comfort us. Fear of change tempts us to become conservative in our thinking and behaviors, I said. Embracing such uncertainty, on the other hand, is what makes us progressive and leads to progress. Last July, I also gave a sermon entitled "The Compulsion to Convince," about our instinctive need to feel that we are right. And that when this happens, it is our ideas, our memes, that parasitize our behavior, that are in control of us, not the other way around. I talked a lot about how emotional intelligence can give us the tools to overcome this compulsion to be right, but also about how our liberalism is enough to help us do so. Liberalism can help us overcome our compulsion to be right. How? Well, as I said, for when we believe all people should be free to express themselves, including those we disagree with, no matter how vehemently, we are able to override the mimetic instinct to dominate others. If we believe ethically others should be free, then we are not going to unethically dominate them. If we do dominate them, we don't really have that ethic, even if we give linguistic homage to it. When we require empirical and well-reasoned evidence for our beliefs so that we are less likely to merely rationalize our emotions, then we can more easily let go of those memes that no longer serve us, even the most insistent and enduring memes. Right? There's memes that go way back, hundreds, even thousands of years, that we haven't yet let go of. Liberalism helps us do that. Right? The Renaissance came right after the Reformation, and immediately the world flourished with atheists. Yeah, people who dared to say, "I'm an atheist," in public. A lot of the Enlightenment philosophers were atheists. Right then and there, at the birth of liberalism. And when we are tolerant, we assure our communities and societies we can live in peace no matter our differences. This theme was continued in my March sermon, Bringing Up Our Brainchild, Real Life and the Omnipotence of Thought, in which, using Steven Pinker's language, I distinguished between the mythology mindset, which I won't go into, and the reality mindset, the latter of which is a product of our liberal heritage. The reality mindset is a product of our liberal heritage. It doesn't mean we have the corner on what's real, but it is a mindset to grasp what's real, to have our thinking depend upon what reality is to the best of our understanding. Pinker says, "We children of the Enlightenment embrace the radical creed of universal realism." Imagine a radical creed of universal realism, that what's real is real everywhere, whatever it is. Reality is reality. versus your reality and my reality are different realities. They contradict each other, but they're both real because we want them to be. We hold that all our beliefs should fall within the reality mindset. We care about whether our creation story, our founding legends, our theories of invisible nutrients and germs and forces, our conceptions of the powerful, our suspicions about our enemies are true or false. We care about that. We don't turn on Fox News or MSNBC and say, "Tell me what I want to hear." We say, what is it I want to hear? Now, what's true? How am I deceiving myself? Intellectual integrity. I could give other examples of this, but for now, it's enough to point out that in addition to addressing the many problems we face, I try to offer practical advice for living the best we can, especially in the face of adversity. And I can't do all that obviously in one sermon. It's an ongoing evolution for all of us, including myself. So I try to extend it throughout my sermons. Multiple sermons over time, over years. And I've particularly enjoyed breathing renewed life into the timely, if not timeless, sermons of my renowned predecessor here at UUCS. What's that S stand for, Gordon? Spokane. Reverend John H. Dietrich, the father of religious humanism, who was here in the early part of the 20th century. Little did I know when I first began this project of editing and delivering some of his sermons that they would be so significant for us today. Really just what we needed. And in his sermon, What is a Liberal, written in the 1930s, okay, Dietrich spoke of a false kind of liberalism, which I think is precisely descriptive of the insidious mindset that is infecting the Unitarian Universalist Association's leadership, as well as much of the liberal world today. He says, this is liberalism that makes exaggerated claims on behalf of humanity and stakes the whole cause on some one particular reform. According to this view, humanity has been through the centuries the victim of unjust laws and institutions and might realize utopia tomorrow, where only the clutches of a vampire minority, the privileged class, relaxed. And this type of liberalism usually has its one patent nostrum, its one universal cure-all by which humanity must thus be freed. 1930s. Today, this universal cure-all is a singular approach to social justice that is intolerant of others and therefore illiberal. It is punitive of dissenters and therefore illiberal. It is segregationist in its approach, denying our common humanity and is therefore illiberal, and is based upon the same self-righteousness and authoritarian thinking that motivated the founders of Soviet Russia and Maoist China, and is therefore illiberal. In the other of Dietrich's sermons, I shared the kind of salvation man needs. The father of religious humanism argues that we don't need a savior. We need lots of them. And in this sense, he said, every man and woman living today may become a savior, insofar as they devote their lives to that which makes for the welfare of humanity. There's that humanistic ethic again. Be faithful and true in every respect. Stand by the principles of right as you see them. Be honest and fearless. See what you can of the true and the beautiful and the good, and stand for those things, fearing neither what the crowd may think nor what the crowd may do. For the person is a Savior, who, fearing neither the hatred of others for one's persistence, nor being induced to desert their ranks by the blandishments and flatteries of the world, follow truth and justice whithersoever they lead. Man, I wish that guy was still alive today. Of course, I wouldn't have a job. It is my job. That's right, Gordon. Thank you. So as you can see, I've spent most of the year delving into history, into the past, in order to better understand the present, how we got here, and what old truths must be remembered. As an old Taoist proverb says, which I got from watching Kung Fu, one of my favorite TV shows as a kid, this is true. I've gone through that series, and I've written out all the beautiful sayings into a book called The Tao of Kung Fu. It's not published because I don't have the rights, but I refer to it now and then. And this is one of those sayings that came from Kung Fu, starring David Carradine. If one dwells on the past, then one robs the present. But if one ignores the past, then one may rob the future. For the seeds of our destiny are nurtured by the roots of the past. And I believe this is true of Unitarianism, that its present problems have emerged because we have forgotten its rich history, its rich values, and its future will depend upon us rediscovering them. Just as human society will only flourish by rediscovering them, which is why we have to remind them. That's our job. So that's what I'm trying to do today for all of us, and for the sake of liberal religion and the whole world that needs it. But I must admit that the past does drag me down at times. Right? The past is weighty. It has gravity. I'm one of those people that has spent my life leaving the past behind. Now it's my job to delve into it. It's heavy. It's heavy stuff. It's work. You know, you gotta grasp things and hold on to them. It's not easy. And I would rather be focusing on the future. That's what makes me happy. I've not spoken much this year at all about technology and the promise that it's bringing us, which many of you know is my happy place. That's the subject that I find most personally uplifting and inspiring. Nevertheless, duty calls. And I am content to do what I must to be of most benefit to this congregation, to our religion, and to the world during my short time here. In all, I've given 37 sermons from this pulpit during the past year, not counting the many that I've given elsewhere during my Sundays off. Of them all, there are 3 that stand out as particularly meaningful to me. So I'll start to wrap up with those. The Mr. Rogers Neighborhood intergenerational service held this past May was incredibly moving to do the research on that man. And I have said ever since that if there is any truth to the belief that there are angels among us, Mr. Rogers was proof. Another important sermon for me was misappropriation or mongrelization, why I choose the latter, which I delivered on March 12th. It was about the false belief that human beings must be kept separated from each other based upon our identities, and that it is morally wrong for us to borrow from one another's cultures, as if that were even possible. That's something, you know what that's called? It's called a double bind. It makes us crazy to be asked to suggest that there's something unethical about us doing something we cannot help but do. So here I'm only going to cite the Salman Rushdie quote that inspired me to give this sermon. Beautiful. One of the best things of the year was my discovery of this quote, for me. Those who oppose the novel most vociferously today are of the opinion that intermingling with a different culture will inevitably weaken and ruin their own. I am the opposite of this opinion. The Satanic Verses celebrates hybridity, impurity, intermingling, the transformation that comes of new and unexpected combinations of human beings, cultures, ideas, politics, movies, and songs. It rejoices in mongrelization and fears the absolutism of the pure.